Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala sayyidina Mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahabatihi ajma'in. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Subhanaka la fahma lana illa ma fahamtana innaka antal jawadul karim. Wa rabbi zidni ilma. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Tilka hududullah. ومن يطع الله ورسوله يدخله جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها وذلك الفوز العظيم ومن يعص الله ورسوله يتعد حدوده يدخله نارا خالدا فيها وله عذاب مهين. صدق الله مولانا العظيم. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after elucidating the ahkam, or the rules and regulations according to mirath, inheritance, and we talked about that to some extent extensively. So the Quranic method of tarbiyah and preparing the minds and the hearts to accept the orders of Allah, as we mentioned from time to time, that legislature does not change the behavior of human beings. Laws don't change people. But da'wat, ta'aleem and tarbiyah changes people. The prophetic mission of da'wat, of invitation, of education, of purification, this is what changes people's minds and hearts and makes them receptive to the orders and injunctions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the prohibitions. And therefore we find that when the minds and the hearts are prepared, then it's very easy to follow the orders of Allah. And even though they be very difficult, the Sahaba, were not prepared to live with themselves with the blemish of sin until they were certain that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had forgiven them. They would come to Rasulullah, even if it meant to expose themselves to stoning to death. And that happened, on more than one occasion. It happened twice during the time of Rasulullah that a sahabiya also, they came to Rasulullah and said, Ya Rasulullah, tahirni, O Prophet of Allah, cleanse me. I've filthied myself with the filth of sin. So they couldn't live with themselves. Why? Because the hearts and the minds were prepared to accept. So this is and also most of the regulations of Islam are not going to be enforced, by force and coercion by the government. It's the personal taqwa, it's the personal fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Someone can close his doors and do whatever he feels like doing. However, what's going to prevent a person from entering into the prohibitions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and continuously obeying the orders? It's the taqwa. A-taqwa ha-huna, as the Nabi said, here in the heart, in the bosom of the human being is that piece of flesh. If it is corrected, then the human is corrected. His actions are corrected. His thinking is corrected. His speech is corrected. Everything is corrected. If it's putrefied, if it's corrupted, then everything he does is corrupted. So therefore, we always find that the Quranic injunctions are, presented along with targheeb and tarheeb. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, Tilka hududullah, these are the boundaries of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And whosoever obeys Allah, may yuti Allah wa Rasuluhu, who obeys Allah and His Rasul, yudkhilhu jannatin tajri min tahtiha. What will you get if you obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You'll be placed into paradise, into gardens, underneath which rivers flow forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. What do you get? Right? Khalidina fiha, forever, forever, forever. Not trillions and millions. It's unthinkable, what the consequences of following the orders of Allah and remaining aloof from His prohibitions. وَذَلِكَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ, and that is the great achievement. You're a Fortune 500 company, you become the President of the United States, you went to the moon, the Mars, you went to the outer reaches of space. That's not a big deal. A big deal is to get into Jannah. Who is saved from the tortures of hellfire and is put into paradise. That is the person who has succeeded. That is the great and magnanimous achievement and success. And then again, targhib and then tarhib. And then, encouraging and then frightening. And who disobeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his Rasul wa Rasuluhu وَيَتَعَدَّ حُدُودَهُ. And he goes outside, he crosses the limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the boundaries of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. يُدْخِلْهُ نَارًا. He will be placed into fire. خَالِدًا فِيهَا. Also, continuously therein. Now, if he's a person of Iman, then it will be a cleansing. And if he's a person of Kufr, it will be his residence and abode. خَالِدًا فِيهَا وَلَهُ عَذَابٌ مُهِينٌ. Continuously there, and on top of that, there will be a punishment which is extremely humiliating and degrading. It's a painful and it's humiliating, and it's forever and ever and ever for the people of Kufr, and it is for who knows how long for the people of Iman. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us all. So now just a few masail that are not explicitly mentioned that need to be noted. And again, also, we can't emphasize this enough in these regulations, as well as any regulations of the Quran and Sunnah, Sharia, then we always need to go to the ulama, the people who are the muftis. In fact, when there's a fiqh masala and there's a legal issue, we need to go to the muftis to find out exactly where we stand on that, to ensure that we are within these bounds, that we are among the people who are obeying Allah and His Rasul, and not those who are disobeying. So, one of the things, the first thing is that لا يرث المؤمن الكافر ولا يرث الكافر المؤمن, that there is not inheritance between people of different belief sets. So, the people of Islam cannot inherit from the people of Kufr, and vice versa. I had a classmate in Makkah. He was the son of one of the more or less like kings of one of the countries in Africa. But he accepted Islam. And his father died and left millions. So while he was there as a student, his country called him and said, "Hey, take your inheritance, from your father." He said, "I don't have any inheritance, father. A non-Muslim does not inherit. A Muslim does not inherit a non-Muslim," and he left these millions. So this is, taqwa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us. So that's one thing. There are also other regulations. On the other hand, this is inheritance. Those those compulsory portions which we talked about. Now, if there is a wasiyah, if there's a will and testament, then that is another issue, and again, that can be referred to the ulama. And there's, in some of those cases, there's a possibility of acceptance there, but not the actual portions which are described, in law. Also, suppose somebody kills, somebody that he inherits from. And this happens quite often. And usually they do it, obviously they don't do it openly, they do it secretly, hoping to inherit. This happens quite a lot in America, to, get the insurance policy and get the inheritance. Of course, if that comes to light, then obviously he's not going to inherit anything. Even though he's an heir, he's going to inherit the fire of Jahannam and nothing more than that. Also, what about the child who is unborn yet? We talked about the children, obviously children who are present. What about the child who's unborn yet? Yes, he also gets a portion. So therefore, the inheritance should be held until the child is born, because it might be a man, it might be a woman, it might be a girl or a boy. So it would differ in that case. So it's best to hold the inheritance distribution until the birth. If it needs to be distributed, then a portion should be held for that newborn child, with a maximum amount that, in the event that it's a boy or girl, and then there could be a reconciliation after that, once the child is born and it's to be seen whether it's a boy or a girl. What about if a woman who has been divorced and she remains in iddah, she remains in her waiting period? So there's two situations. One is that the person is in marad al-maut. So the person who's dying, the person who's dying, this is a peculiar circumstance in which it happens that people tend to, if they have animosity towards their wife or to their heirs, then they cut them off. We find that very happening a lot here, where you can write your will any way you like. But in Islam, we don't allow this, because there is no tyranny to anyone. So if the woman has been divorced in what we call a talaq al-raj'i, a talaq which, there's a possibility of return, and the fellow dies, and even if it was irrevocable, and he's in the death pangs, he's in the what we call marad al-maut, the sickness in which he dies, and it's expected that is what's going to happen. So she's not going to be prevented from her inheritance. Of course, if that finishes, then she's now severed. The relations are severed, and that's a different story. If it wasn't, if suppose the fellow divorces his wife and he wasn't sick and there wasn't any signs that he's going to die quickly, but in that, and he happened to divorce her 3 times, which is not to be done, but he did it, or it's an irrevocable divorce. There's certain words that are used that make it irrevocable. So in that case, then all of a sudden he dies. So there, that she won't be inheriting in that situation. Also, if she is the one who initiates the divorce process by taking a khula, so now she also, regardless, she will be disqualified. The last thing that we want to talk about is that, as we mentioned, we have those who inherit by what we call al-fariḍa, al-fard, ashab al-fara'id, those who have specific portions, we mentioned them. And then we have others who are what we call the asaba, and these are 3 categories. And it's a little bit complicated, but it's basically the male progeny according to their closeness. The son, the grandson, the father, the grandfather, and the brother who is what we call shaqiq, who is from the mother and father, and we also have the brother who is the brother from with the father alone. And then the uncle who is also shaqiq, he's the uncle of his brother's brother from both mother and father, and also the uncle who is the brother of the father from the father's side. And then the cousin, we call it ibn al-am, the cousin who is the son of the paternal uncle, not the maternal uncle. This is the wil arham, and that's the last thing we'll touch. So that cousin also, who is from the uncle who is the shaqiq, or from the side of the father alone with different mothers, those 2 brothers, who the father and the uncle. And then lastly, the one who emancipates a slave. Suppose a slave who has been emancipated dies. So also, if there's nobody else, then the person who has emancipated that slave is also going to inherit, whether it's a man or a woman. Then we have what we call al-asaba bil-ghair. This is what we call asaba bin-nafs. This person is going to take on, the remainder. And the asaba, the basic principle is this, that the people who have set portions, they take their portions. Whatever is left, it goes to this asaba of the 3 types. The first is called asaba bin-nafs. These people will take the remaining portion, regardless of who's with them or who's not with them. And then we have what we call asaba bil-ghair. So these are going to take a portion when they are along with others, and they happen to be with others. So that is the daughter with the son, as we also heard about that. She will also take a portion. And then also the daughter of the son. So one is the daughter and one is the daughter of the son. Now keep in mind, you see, it's always through, the relationship goes through the males in all of these cases, right? The daughter of the son with the son of the son. So they are brothers and sisters. So they also. And also the sister who is the shaqiqa, again, the sister who is from the same mother and father, and also the ukht, the sister who is only from she's the sister from the father al-don. And then we have lastly what we call al-asaba mal ghair. This is a situation where this individual will inherit if it happens to be with this particular other person, and that is the sister who is the shaqiq, the sister who is the sister of the deceased brother from both mother and father, or from the father, with the what we call the far al-warith, who is the female who is going to inherit. So she, and as we remember that the sister will inherit when there is no parents and there is no children. So this gets a little bit complicated, as I mentioned, and so therefore whenever we're faced with this situation, we need to go to those muftis who are involved in this all the time to sort it out. Now the last thing, suppose none of these people are available. We don't have any ashab al-farad, we don't have any asaba. Then we have what we call dhul arham. And as we mentioned, the asaba, these are all people that are connected to the deceased through males, through male relatives. So if we don't have any of those, then what do? Or if we don't have any asaba, and we only have ashab al-fara'id, only the people who get portions, there's no asaba, there's the remaining, so that remaining portion gets distributed according to their portions. And then if we don't have any of those people, then the wil arham, those relatives, which are the relatives from the mother's side, then they will, according to the hierarchy, which is also described. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq and give us the ability to have the appreciation, as we mentioned earlier, that inheritance, these are property rights, which are very peculiar, and they are very sensitive. And on the Day of Judgment, property rights are going to be extremely critical, because people are not going to be so merciful as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are all looking to get whatever they can. So we need to be very careful and appreciate that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set out these rules and regulations to keep things under in everyone's best interests. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. والسلام